All right, when we finish with diffusion, remember, again, I'm going to skip for just a second, the concept of time-space compression. Right, when we're talking about diffusion, and we talked about distance decay, the fact that an innovation is only going to go so far, right? The likelihood of it diffusing from the hearth it decreases as you get further away, and time, right, is the longer it goes along. Remember the game of telephone, right? The farther it has to go and the more time it takes, the less likely it's going to get there in the same way as it left the hearth. It can be altered, it can be rejected. But because of the fact that we have such a more globalized and connected world, things are different, right? The likelihood of diffusion depends upon how things are connected. So if the hearth is Los Angeles and this place here is New York, right, it's almost instantaneous diffusion, right? If you're going here to a place in sub-Saharan Africa that doesn't have access to the internet, right, you're going to have to go the old-fashioned way, and that's somebody taking it there. Or maybe through a newspaper or something that is not as quick as social media, right? So popular culture, the question here, right, is highly affected. The more connected, the more the innovation will go from the hearth to that area. It will get there faster, and it will go as far as it's going to go faster. The less connected, right, it's going to take longer to get to that furthest point, that furthest point is going to be even further away because we have to do it the old-fashioned way. All right, let's go back to density, right? Remember we talked about different types of densities depending upon, what you're looking at. This is a dot map, right? Dot maps are really great for talking about different types of density, right? How packed something is. So we have arithmetic density, which talks about the number of people per a certain area. So we can talk about a square mile, we can talk about a square kilometer, right, and how many people will live in that particular area. Again, some, pretty good information, but not always sufficient. Right? We know that the population of the United States, the density in the Northeast is super packed. If you go out like Wyoming, it's not going to be as packed. So when I look at an average between those two areas, it's going to be a bit misleading. Right? And it also doesn't necessarily tell you what they call the carrying capacity, how many people can actually live in that area. If we go to physiologic density, the density of the number of people per acre or kilometer, square kilometer of farmable land, it's going to give me more information, because in that information I can see how many people does this farmable land have to support, right? How many people can actually live here? Some of that, again, is misleading because of the fact that I have like Bangladesh, which is the most dense place on earth, and that they have a lot of farmable land, right? But they are not able to feed as many people as good a diet because of the fact there's just so many of them. The United States, we have a lot of farmable land, so our physiologic density is going to be smaller. But we are able to feed not just ourselves, but be able to feed people from all over the world. We are, in some areas, we're called the breadbasket of the world. All right. Okay, moving on. Okay. What models are you guys going to have to know for this one? And here's just a list of one I got from a book, and I think it's a pretty good list. Right? If you are going to get a question and you're going to have to be able to show them that you are able to talk through multiple units, not just one, right? You're going to have to know the demographic transition model. I think I just can't stress enough. That's probably the most important model that we've learned, because remember, it talks only about population, right? But you can read so much into it. If you're looking at a stage 2 country with a population that is growing, right? High birth rate, declining death rate, right? The demographic transition model tells you that this is a country that has a significant amount of growth, and it gets even greater as they move through stage 2 and then move into stage 3, right? But because of that population information, you can infer other information into the transition model, right? So if you're asked a question about the demographic transition model, you stick to population and then start to infer, right? A demographic transition stage 2 country is probably periphery. It's probably subsistence agriculture. A declining death rate means that people are starting to live longer, but because of poor nutrition and poor medical care, right, they still have a high, child mortality rate. Then you can start to talk about dependency ratios for younger people. You can start to talk about having a growing a workforce as they start to get better nutrition and better medical care. You're going to have a growing workforce. You're not going to need so much immigration labor, right? And then you can talk about all the other ones. But it is a population model. Talk about Malthus. Malthus, I think, is prime for this particular test because of the fact that we are using more and more good farmland for development for our huge growing population, right? Does that mean that eventually we're going to use up our farmland for something other than farming, and we're not going to be able to feed people, right? Von Thunen talks about cost of land versus cost of transportation, all right? So make sure you know that the cost of transportation, right, gets bigger as you go out further, but the cost of land goes down. So you're going to take things out to the farther areas that don't require the best of farmland. And you're going to spend the money on good farmland closer to the city because, it's perishable, it's bulky, it's going to have a lot of transportation costs as well, right? The highest priced property is always located closest to the city. It's the most desirable. And as you move out, the price gets lower. Right? Urban models, be familiar and talk about the central place theory, what that means, right? We covered that in one of the other units. And know all the city models, right? You have to know concentric zone, sector, multiple nuclei for North American cities. You need to know Latin America. You need to know Southeast Asian city model as well as African city models. And you have to be able to talk about the differences and the similarities, right? Don't just say it, explain it. Right. Again, I think we talked about the last one in a Latin American model or an African model. The poor live outside, and in the North American model, the poor live closer to the inside. All right, we're going to switch after this. You guys are going to finish the quiz for this unit, and then we're going to start talking about free response questions. Right. So whatever next unit you come to is going to be very different. All right, so hopefully you've learned these 7 units and you're able to apply them into the free response questions.